Hello and welcome to this edition of Back in History. In this edition, we bring to you the story of how President Idris Deby of Chad lost his life at the battlefront while personally commanding his troops in battle against insurgents. We also narrate the story of his life and how he seized power from President Hissene Habre in 1990 and his numerous battles with insurgent groups throughout his presidency. Idris Deby was about the first person in contemporary history to have died at the battlefield as president. Before he ascended the presidency of his country, he was a combatant, and while serving as president, he still went to the war front to lead his soldiers to battle until one of the occasions when he was fallen to the ground by bullets fired sporadically at him. He was quickly flown back to the capital of his country in N'Djamena for treatment, but 2 days after the attack, he passed on to the great beyond. A date was then fixed for his burial, and with his burial, a chapter was closed in the history of the Republic of Chad. Idris Deby was a Chadian politician and military officer. He was the 6th president of Chad. He seized power in December 1990, but officially took office in early January 1991 and remained in office till his death in April 2021. He was in office for a total of 30 years. He was named among sit-tight leaders in Africa. He was known for several things, one of which was his ability to square up with insurgents and militants in the Sahel region and continually push them back with records of victory on several occasions. For reasons that have become difficult for researchers and historians to describe in one simple sentence, the Sahel region became a hotbed of endless violent attacks and has even remained so till today. Whatever happens in the Sahel region affects the countries around the Sahel directly, including Chad. It is akin to raindrops in a community close to each other. Everyone in the community and in the ecosystem gets affected one way or the other. That is the story of the Sahel. Thousands of lives, both of combatant soldiers and of innocent civilians, have been lost to the seemingly intractable violence in the Sahel. Countries in and around the region, particularly Burkina Faso, Mali, Niger, and Chad, have witnessed severe and continually expanding jihadist insurgency since about 2012, and the insurgency has not ended till this day. As president of Chad, Idris Deby's country was seriously affected by the activities of the insurgents in the Sahel. Like every other leader who finds himself in such precarious situation, Idris Deby fought the insurgents and personally took up arms and also took command positions on a number of times to keep his country safe. Idris Deby was born on 18th June 1952 in the village of Badoba. His father was a headsman of the Bidayat clan of Zagawa community. After attending Quranic school in Teen, Idris Deby studied at the École Française in Fada and at the Franco-Arab school in Ebeche. He also attended the Lycée Jacques Modena in Bongo and held a bachelor's degree in science. After finishing school, he entered the officer's school in N'Djamena. From there, he was sent to France for training, returning to Chad in 1976 with a professional pilot certificate. On his return from France, he discovered to his chagrin that his country, Chad, had become a battleground for many armed groups, with each group fighting ferociously to take control of the country. Idris Deby chose to tie his fortunes to those of Hissene Habre, one of the warlords in Chad at the time. Habre fought and successfully secured the presidency of his country. A year after Habre became the president in 1982, Deby was made commander-in-chief of the army. Idris distinguished himself in 1984 by destroying pro-Libyan forces in eastern Chad. In 1985, Habre sent him to Paris for a certificate course, and upon his return in 1986, he was made chief military advisor to the president. In 1987, he confronted Libyan forces on the field with the help of France in what was known by many as the Toyota War. Idris had secured multiple victories even as a young military officer and was already in the good books of the President Hissene Habre. Their relationship, however, went sour when Idris became uncomfortable with the spate of killings of perceived political opponents that went on in Chad during President Hissene Habre's regime. Habre's regime was at some point characterized by widespread political killings, systematic torture, imprisonment of opponents, and disappearance of many people that held opposing views from that of the president. Idris Deby's tribesmen, and in some cases his close friends, were seriously affected by the killings, and Idris was not happy. He expressed his reservations to President Hissene Habre. Habre then accused him of planning to stage a coup against his government. Idris saw the danger that was to follow and decided to flee from Chad into Darfur and then to Libya, where he was warmly received by the president and long-standing supreme leader of Libya at the time, Muammar Gaddafi. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi was a long-standing enemy of President Hissene Habre. He then offered Idris Deby asylum and military assistance and training with a view to seizing power from Habre back home in Chad. Muammar Gaddafi was a known sponsor of such missions, and history records that he had indeed sponsored a number of revolutionary forces against their home countries. He was the chief financier of Charles Taylor of Liberia. As president of Libya, he sat on huge petrodollars and could spend any amount to fund a mission to unseat a government he had no love for. Colonel Muammar Gaddafi bankrolled Idris Deby on the mission to unseat President Hissene Habre. At this time, Habre had taken many Libyans hostage for one reason or the other, and part of Gaddafi's mission was to secure the release of his countrymen and women the moment Idris Deby was able to unseat President Habre and ascend the presidency. Idris first relocated from Libya to Sudan in 1989 and formed the Patriotic Salvation Movement, an insurgents group with financial backing from Libya. This group then began operations against President Habre, and on 2nd December 1990, Idris Deby's troops marched into N'Djamena, the capital of Chad, and successfully removed President Hissene Habre from office. This was historic, and several persons were shocked that the dreaded dictator President Hissene Habre could be removed from office at the time he was removed. Idris was happy, so also was Gaddafi, his major financier. A new sheriff was now in town. Idris Deby assumed the presidency of Chad formally in January 1991, having effectively dethroned President Habre. He started as a military officer in uniform and later transited to become a civilian president. Idris was elected over and again every 5 years up until the time of his death at the battlefront in 2021, equaling a total of 30 years in power. At the time of his death, he was a president awaiting swearing in, having just won election the 10th time. He was one of the longest serving leaders in the contemporary history of Africa. During his first 2 years in office, Deby faced a series of coup attempts as government forces clashed with pro-Habre rebel groups such as the Movement for Democracy and Development, the MDD. Seeking to quell dissent in 1993, Chad legalized political parties and held a national conference which resulted in the gathering of 750 delegates, the government representatives, trade unions, and the army to discuss the establishment of a pluralist democracy in Chad. Idris was a hard man, but he was also flexible in response to the situations that sprung up at every given moment. He weathered the storms that trailed his administration throughout his stay in power. Idris Deby signed a bill abolishing capital punishment in 2020. The firing squad was last used in Chad on terrorists in 2015. In June 2020, the National Assembly bestowed Deby with the additional title of Marshal of Chad for, quote, service rendered to the nation and the numerous military victories won both inside and outside the country, end of quote. He officially received the title during a ceremony marking the 60th anniversary of Chad's independence on 11th August 2015. In February 2021, Deby announced that Chad would send 1,200 soldiers alongside French troops to the Sahel border between Niger, Mali, and Burkina Faso to combat the insurgents. He was someone who also walked the talk. He had personally visited his troops at the front lines and did not show any sign of his readiness to stop going to the front lines anytime soon by himself. Idris Deby went to command the Chadian soldiers in person on the front lines fighting the northern rebel incursion by the group known as the Front for Change and Concord in Chad, FACT. According to the accounts from both military and rebel spokesmen, on 18 April 2021, he was said to have been caught in a crossfire in the village of Mele near the town of Noko. He sustained lethal gunshot injuries. He was immediately flown to the capital N'Djamena for emergency medical attention. But on 20th April 2021, he succumbed to the wounds and was pronounced dead by the doctors on duty. He was 68 years old at the time of his death. He went into history as the first sitting president in the contemporary history of Africa and of the world to die at the battlefront while personally commanding his troops and taking part in battle. Following his death, the Chadian parliament and government were both dissolved and a transitional military council was formed in its place with President Idris Deby's son, Mahamat Deby Itno, as chairman. In addition, the constitution of Chad was suspended with immediate effect and replaced by a new charter. The government ordered a 14-day national mourning with flags flown at half-mast. Public institutions were also closed and educational establishments were equally closed. Similarly, a 3-day national mourning was announced by Mali and South Sudan, while a 1-day each of national mourning was declared in Cuba, Democratic Republic of the Congo, Guinea, and Republic of the Congo. Tributes poured in from across Africa and from several countries of the world. On 23 April 2021, the mortal body of Idris Deby was lowered to the grave. On that day, thousands gathered in the streets of N'Djamena to pay their last respects to President Idris Deby. French President Emmanuel Macron, Guinean President Alpha Condé, and several other African leaders attended the funeral. Idris Deby was a die-hard follower of Muammar Gaddafi of Libya and was a graduate of Muammar Gaddafi's World Revolutionary Center. Deby was polygamous and had 4 wives and at least a dozen children. Deby was a practicing Muslim till his death. Thanks for watching this edition of Back in History, and do remember to subscribe to the channel or follow the page for regular notification on every new video. I am your friend and host Ekemini Udim, wishing you the best of time in all you do.